Welcome back to Grace Stories. This is Garrett from Grace Community Church. We're really glad that you took the time to stop, listen, or watch if you're on YouTube or if you're on Spotify, Google Podcast. And I am joined this week with Mike Sorensen, our pastor of discipleship and small groups. We wanted to get together and discuss a little bit about what Mike has been processing as we're thinking about some of the things we talked about for Father's Day. If you didn't get to hear the sermon that Rod gave and then some of the takeaways that Mike did, you can find that on YouTube or on our website. It's the most recent sermon that we streamed. And so to start off, the first question I have for you, Mike, as we're thinking about some of the things that you encouraged or challenged the dads here at Grace to do, what did that process of thinking through some of the questions, what did that look like for you and your family?
Yeah, I think it starts with, I was fortunate enough in this case to know weeks ahead of time kind of the topic Rod was going to be talking about, and so to be able to see this is where we were going. So it led me to pray about, okay, well, it started with how do I want to apply this as a parent? Just looking ahead and saying, okay, I'm looking at being challenged by the way the father looked at the son and endorsed him publicly, and very intentionally, and telling with those witnesses present, saying, this is my son with whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him, and seeing those examples of how the father treated the son. So it's like, okay, well, what is that challenging me to do? So that's kind of where it started for me as we first started talking, and I knew what Rod's topic was going to be and whatnot. So I had well advanced for weeks ahead of time because Rod plans very early. So I think with that for me, it started with the challenge of what do I need to do as a parent to do that? And so, as I mentioned my points, it starts with just watching, and I do some of that anyway with my kids. I'm analytical that way, so I tend to kind of watch them and just try to understand. I've done a lot of strengths training and stuff like this. I do Gallup Strengths Finder, stuff like that. So I'm always curious about my kids' strengths and what's different about them. But a lot of them it's just watching in downtime around the house. Instead of run and do stuff, it was trying to stop and just notice, what's different in their personalities, what's different in the way they do things, what gifts do I see, and trying to see the good in that. So it was really, a lot of it was that. And then it was taking time to just sit down and write those things out. So the process for me looks a lot like kind of journaling. And when I journal for something like that, it may not look like much when I'm journaling because I'll just write out a number of things, and it may not make sense initially. So it's just a lot of information. Then I try to organize that, and then it's cutting down, narrowing down, trying to break that down into how can I narrow it down to something really succinct that I could share quickly and that I know could stick. And then there's just a lot of, I'll do that. I'll be thinking about it, and then it'll just be kind of running around in my head. And even the one that I chose for Nora changed last minute. It was the weekend kind of leading up to there that it the right word of for her as an entertainer clicked, and I'm like, that's really the best way to describe her as an entertainer. Yeah. But I never felt quite certain even after I'd already kind of put stuff together. I kind of changed that one last minute. So there's kind of an ongoing with me anyway. I kind of weird process, but there's always stuff kind of rattling around in my head even when I'm doing something else. So it was giving myself something to be thinking about in a positive way instead of just what I'm trying to get done. I think it was for me.
Yeah, there were a couple of things you mentioned. I think one of the things is, the relationship that the son had with the father. If you're thinking about the Trinity and that unique relationship that they had and continue to have, and I like that you thought about, well, how does that challenge myself as a father,
Mm-hmm.
the relationship that I have with my children, what should I be doing? And I think in our society, when everything is so, fast paced, and it's all about going to work and coming home and going to the next, event or game or whatever you're doing with your kids, you can, I think it's easy to fall into a trap where you're constantly worried about what you're doing next, or how you're going to fit everything in. And this can, I think, translate to all sorts of things, the time that you take to read your Bible, or, the time that you take to spend quality time with maybe like a spouse or family members. But thinking about your kids, for you, what are some of the challenges? Because you have 4 kids and you have a full-time job, and then there are some things that I know that you're doing on the side, and working with counseling and different things. And so for you, what are some of the challenges about trying to stop and observe, and to not worry about anything else that's going on in the moment, but to just put all of your focus on, your kids?
It's that's a huge part of the challenge, because the easy thing for me, because I have 4 girls. They're 8, 6, 4, and 2. So that's busy in and of itself, and I give my wife much credit because she's doing that 90% of the time. Other times when I'm at the church or working on stuff. But when I get home, especially in a short window of time for me personally, I'll get home after our work is over here at the church, and I'll get home and it's immediately like we need to get dinner on the table.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get dishes done. We need to get them upstairs, brush teeth, get people ready for bed and all that stuff. And I know how much there is to do in that time frame. I know there's not a lot of downtime very often to that. And if I take downtime, I know it's going to push bedtime back ultimately. Mm-hmm. That'll be in my head ultimately, as I know all these things that I know we need to get done even on the weekend. And so it's easy to turn into this kind of task-oriented mode. So if I'm looking at, I've got to get dishes done, my kids are just a means to that end, in essence. Like, I'm not observing them. I'm focused on get dishes done or get dinner ready or whatever thing we're trying to finish up. And if I'm focused on that, then if my kids are just getting in the way of that, they're irritating. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, I have something to get done. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly that stuff does have to get done. But I think it's finding time when you're not rushed to do that, because otherwise I'm not going to be observing, hey, what's special and unique about this one of my girls? What does she bring? What does she add to our family? To stop and meditate on it requires me to slow way down in terms of my expectations of what I'm going to get done, in terms of what's going to happen during this day. And it may mean something on that list doesn't get done, that we were intending to do. Mm-hmm. There's always stuff like that. And there's always things on our list that we want to get done that we don't get to. And so it requires that I slow down enough and I'm not focused just on what I want to get done that day, which is easy for me to fall into, and that I'm just enjoying them in the moment. I'm just watching, I'm letting them play a game, and I'm just, watching and noticing that I'm stopping and observing, when they're playing with my wife or they're playing with each other, or there's things going on at home, or they're stepping in and maybe they're helping. So sometimes it's doing something that we're doing, but slowing it down enough to let one of our kids help set the table or help do something like that, in a way that now I'm engaging them on a relational level. And that's not going to be as efficient, obviously. If I'm letting one of our girls set the table, they're not going to set it as fast as I would or something, probably. And they're going to need help. And so it's not going to be the most efficient way to get something done. But it is a way that when I'm doing that, I'm relating to them, and then I'm able to see them learn things. I'm able to see how they do things, how they process things. And so when I get to do that, there's always encouragement, because I get to stop and I get to appreciate the way God created each of them uniquely. And as I kind of took this process and meditate on it, it was really cool to see there was something that each of them brought to our family unit as a whole. When I look at the way we operate, and there's something that each one of those kids has done in our family that adds something. And I can say, wow, the reason that we, have gained this appreciation for learning, part of it is driven by our oldest, or Sophia. Part of the reason we pray so much, she pushes that. And now our other kids do the same thing. I can say all of our kids love to learn. And part of that is because it started with Ellie, who really has a huge appetite to learn. And our other kids feed off of that. Same way that they'll feed off of Sophia in the way she prays. And so to be able to go, wow, they each of them brings something unique to our family, then that's exciting. And then it gives me something that I want to build into. I want to encourage it. I want to, help them learn how to use those gifts and stuff like that, instead of just, why can't you just be quiet so I can get this done? And I think that's the mode I can operate in very easily a lot of the time, especially when I'm stressed and I'm pressed for time and all that stuff. Then it's just, I just want you to be quiet and stay out of the way so we can get this done, because we're running late, we're behind. And to shut that down, and I think to know when it's time to shift to when it's time, like, girls, go play, because this has to get done. There's times where that does have to happen. But I think to know when this is a time not to kind of just justify my own need to get stuff done, and it's time to slow down and play a game, or it's time to slow down and watch them play and just enjoy it for a moment. That's something our world, as busy as it is, does not encourage us to do. And it's easy also, I would say. The other challenge in that moment is not to pull my phone out. That's the other thing that comes to mind, is because I think when there is that moment to slow down, it's easy for me to take that as my opportunity to take a break. It's my opportunity to, check out something on my phone, whether that's Facebook or reading, news stories or something like that. And I'm starting to check on something else. And I'm like, oh, they're occupied and it doesn't require anything of me right now. And so to take a challenge to say, to not do that either, to not disconnect, but to say, like, I'm going to be kind of engaged with what's going on and notice things. So it was a good intentionality. I mean, having to do this process, knowing that I was going to have to talk about it on Father's Day, was a really good process for me to be like, I can't talk about this unless I'm doing it. So I need to start thinking and watching and doing that. So it was good, but it's a hard discipline sometimes to break yourself into.
Yeah. So when you're talking about that, I see kind of two different things that seem to show up. One was, first of all, creating the environment or the atmosphere to be able to take that time and to stop. However you do that, and for some people it might look different because they might not have kids your age, or they might not have as many kids, or their work life might be different. And so one of the things that stood out to me is creating the environment to allow your kids to express themselves in ways that show their gifts and their strengths and their heart and all of those different things. And the other thing that I think, if you could talk more about it, you're creating that atmosphere and the time and the environment so that you can observe your kids, but do you also have to kind of create time and an atmosphere for yourself to reflect on that stuff, to go away from the experiences and the the moments that you have with your kids, and then to say, okay, what did I notice, and what can that mean for them, or for me, or for the way that I disciple and lead my kids?
Yeah, I think there's both, and I think for me there is a process happening when I'm watching, and some of it comes from interacting, like with my wife. We'll have conversations about stuff sometimes, of just noticing the different ways they do things, stuff like that. So there's some of those things that are happening kind of within the flow of things. But and different people operate differently depending on their personality. I'm very much the introvert, so I have to step away from it before I'll get clarity. I think I need meditation time. That's where whether it's journaling or it's just slowing down enough and saying, I can do that. I'm blessed that that's part of my job, so especially for this, it's something I can use work time to do. Not everybody gets that opportunity, but I think I had to create space even within that to say, rather than getting stuff done, there has to be a time for me to slow down enough to think. And I need I need to process that information. Otherwise, it's kind of disjointed in my mind. To narrow it down to make it clear and concise in a way that I could communicate it well. Otherwise, it's kind of fuzzy for me. I'm seeing pieces, I'm noticing stuff, but I don't know how to exactly communicate it until I slow down enough that I stop and go, okay, what is that? I notice, I observed something in their behavior, but I want to know, like, what does that mean? What's that say about her character? What does that say about who she is and the way she's wired, the way God gifted her, or something like that? To narrow that down and be able to say it clearly, concisely, in a way that I could just quickly say that to my kids or say that to someone else about my kids was more of a challenge, because I need to be able to process that quietly and slow down, or it wouldn't. I find I'll have some idea in my head, but the message doesn't get across because I haven't really narrowed it down enough that I could communicate it clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I think that time help that to kind of gel when I'm alone. And I think that makes it come across better. So I definitely use that time. I don't know if everybody does it that way, but I know in my mind, if I don't have that, it won't work well.
Yeah, one of the things that you alluded to a little bit was the ability to take the time to focus and to add clarity to the things that you're noticing in your kids, so that you can communicate it to them better, but also so that you can communicate that to others. So if you saw the sermon, if you know what Mike talked about, part of that was, the ability to be able to share with others the things that you're observing in your kids, and to do that not just with your spouse, but to be able to do that with people publicly. And so I know that you put a lot of that stuff on social media, and there's other ways that you can obviously do that, but thinking about the aspect of being able to share that with people publicly, how important is that? If there's someone on the other side that's saying, I don't really feel comfortable sharing that, or it's fine if I'm just thinking about it myself, but I don't know if I want to tell my kids that, or maybe there's something it's like vulnerability, or whatever it is. What would you say to that person?
I mean, well, to start with, the passages that Rod went into in that sermon, you hear on, like, the Transfiguration, the Father is endorsing the Son and saying, "This is my Son with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And so when he's saying that not just privately to Jesus. This isn't just the Father in a private. I'm sure he did in some ways. Jesus had those private prayer times where he would go away by himself to pray. But this is something that the Father did with disciples there in their presence, and said, I'm saying this out loud. And he was saying it for their benefit as much as for Jesus. And so that model as a parent tells me that I need to not just think it. It's good internally to have an appreciation for how my kids are gifted, and I think that shows up. But I need to make sure they know that, because I think there's an honoring element to that, of kids knowing that their parents see what's good in them. They hear it verbalized. Having a history in counseling, right? I've seen, with that being my background, I've seen a lot of people who will say that they've never had that kind of affirmation from a parent, or, no one ever noticed what I was good at. All I ever heard was the things I was bad at, or the things I did wrong. So I think it carries a certain power and blessing with it when the parent speaks truth into them, and not just yeah, you're really great. You could do anything. Like there's a certain element of our culture that's always like, always speak positive things. And I didn't want to just like with this whole process, I didn't want to just be like, yeah, you're awesome. I don't want generic,
Mm-hmm.
cliche statements. I want to speak to, I see something special in you specifically that's tailored to each one, to say, this is part of how you're uniquely gifted that's different than anybody else. And that gives them a vision for how God might want to use them. And so to take that opportunity, I think is really powerful for a kid. And I think on top of that, the way the father did it publicly, it's powerful for kids to hear their parents brag about them,
Mm-hmm.
to hear someone else talk about and say that they're just listening in, like they're a bystander, or they overhear a parent talking about how great their kid is. I think, and especially when it's specific, I think is a powerful thing. It shapes their image of themselves in terms of who they think they are. If they start to internalize that from what they hear from their parents, if all I told them was that you just mess up all the time, what's wrong with you? Then they internalize that, and part of their framework with their identity of, well, this is who I am. I guess I mess up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm able to show them, this is who you are. You're really gifted at this. And I mean that, and it's sincere and it's real. It's not just made up. That shapes, and they start to say, yeah, I am. I am really good at that. And it matches up with their reality and allows them to operate according to those strengths as they grow up. It affects the choices that they make, the things they choose to pursue. And that internalized true value of, this is who I am in Christ. He created me with gifts. He created me with a unique role in the body of Christ. I'm communicating that truth, not just in a Bible study. I'm communicating it in reality, in real time,
Mm-hmm.
that you were created in the image of God. And that's putting, that's giving that legs. Like it's actually putting it out there in real ways, and not just in a Bible concept kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it does definitely shape their view of themselves when you come into it.
Yeah, I appreciate the way that you said that, because you acknowledged this is the way that God, made your kids, and how he built them to operate. And I think that too often you do get the extremes of, either we're going to affirm everything and just kind of lose meaning of what it means. And it's kind of like, if everyone's kind of special, we're all special, and then we just move on. And then there's the other extreme where people think, well, they just need tough love, and if they don't learn now, they're never going to learn. And they got to learn life's hard and things aren't going to be easy. And so I'm just trying to show them how to get things done. And so I think the way you described it, it's a balance of saying, these are the things that you're good at, and these are the things that someone else might be good at, and we're not all good at the same things. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that someone's more special than another, but it does mean that there's something that God put inside you that intrinsically should drive you. And I think if you're a parent and you're feeding into that, it helps develop the children to be able to do things in the future, whether it's a career or a relationship, or the way that they go through school, different things that they wouldn't have otherwise. And to recognize, these are the things that I'm good at, and this is what I'm going to focus on. And so thinking about some of that, is there anything that you think, when it comes to doing this with your kids, that can also spill over into other parts of your life? taking the time to do what you did, are those things that you can either apply, in other aspects of your family dynamic or in other relationships that you have?
I think in general, it comes down to, it's kind of like the strengths I talked about doing Gallup Strengths Finder stuff. I mean, that's partly a general strengths mindset, is that we'll get more out of somebody basically by playing according to their strengths than you are by trying to fix their weaknesses. And so generally trying to say like, oh, if we can identify with somebody, whether it's my kids or it's somebody I'm working with, or a ministry opportunity with my wife or whatever, I'll get more out of that with somebody if I'm playing according to their strengths and I'm noticing that this is the way they're wired. So I think it's, in general, I think it's harder to look for that. Now, some people, I think there's a generic, the cliche in our culture is this kind of like, you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. Irritates me because it's like, because it kind of reminds me of like a childish way of thinking. Like, when I was, 12 years old, I was still thinking, hey, maybe I'll be an NBA basketball player someday, which was clearly not a possibility. I had to realize there are limits. I'm not tall. I'm not fast. I don't jump high. There's nothing in there that signals, maybe if I obsessively worked on certain things, maybe, who knows. But to kind of realize, like, maybe that's just not that doesn't mean I don't have value. It's not that I can do anything, because I think God can use me however he wants. And so he can do whatever he wants with me. And even if I'm not gifted that way, but I think to look and say he gifted me a certain way for a purpose. So I'm certainly gifted to do whatever he's calling me to do. And I can see clues in the way I am wired, the things that come naturally to me. And so to be able to say, instead of either just discipline myself, just be dutiful and don't enjoy what you do. Sometimes there's the discipline, well, this is the right thing to do, everybody should do this kind of approach. And no enjoyment whatsoever, that would just, this is the honorable thing to do kind of mentality. I can say, hey, there's certain things I enjoy more than others. There's certain ways, things that come naturally to me, ways that I do things. I can say, God created me that way for a reason, and I want to use that. So, when I go into something, I've been, from the beginning, I always wanted to do a job that I enjoyed doing. That was something I think instilled from early childhood. I'll credit my dad for doing that, but that I think I always wanted to do something that I felt fit me and that I love doing. And, aiming it that way and saying there's certain things that fit me and certain things that don't. That doesn't mean I always get to do everything I want to do the way I like it, but those can be clues towards the type of stuff that I'm going to succeed at. And I want my kids to be able to do the same thing. And I want to be able to affirm where they have a unique fit in the body of Christ. And so to be able to say, you're an arm, or you're a leg, or you're a foot, whatever, to be able to them to start to notice that and unpack that in a positive way, instead of just, well, why can't you do this? Well, why can't you do that? Or trying to say, you should do this, whether that fits them or not. And then if they can't, then they feel like a failure. That just doesn't seem like I don't think it's a biblical way of going about it. I don't think it's the way God treats us or expects from us. And so to be able to say, I think that's true in how we deal with people in general, that I think this is the way God operates with people. And he empowers them to do what he wants to do. He gifts them to do certain things. And all of those gifts have value, even though some are celebrated more than others. Because I think by our own selfish nature, if I can do whatever I want to do, what I want to do is always kind of self-centered in a way. It's like, well, I want to be a big star or be an athlete, or there's, everybody, it's kind of like the American Idol, I tell you, when you do the American Idol tryouts, there's all these people that think they're the next great superstar. Not all of you are gifted that way, right? There's clearly people that that's not the direction they should be going. But of course, selfishly, there's this allure of, I want to be, these cool, celebrated, famous things. and no one wants to be gifted at doing administrative tasks or, something like that. Being responsible, like, the Strengths Finder, my number one was responsibility. That's never like a cool strength that everybody's like, yeah, I'm responsible. That's part of my gift. But to be able to start to enjoy that, appreciate that, and go, okay, but that is part of the way God wired me. And yeah, certain things there's a normal way that I process things. I should learn to celebrate that and use that. And so, yeah, I think like with my kids or somebody I'm mentoring or discipling, working with a church, I want to operate the same way to see the beauty of how God created them in his image, whoever they are. It makes me a much happier person to do that too. I find when I'm looking around and I notice God created somebody uniquely, that's an exciting thing to see. That if I'm meeting with somebody one-on-one and I'm like, wow, I just got a window into how God created you and the unique way he gifted you and this combination of things you do well, that's exciting to see. And it leads me to worship, to say, wow, God, I'm amazed that you brought this person here, or that you plugged this person in here, or you gifted this person this way. I get to see him doing something. And so I think it's a fun way to be able to operate once you kind of learn to look for it in people. So
yeah, when you were talking, it made me think how many parents try to get their kids to do, X, Y, or Z activity, or to have them do something that they want for their kids without thinking about how is my child built, and what do they want, and what fits them well. If you're trying, to force your kid to play basketball, to use your metaphor, but to do that without thinking about how are they built or wired, and maybe they would be better in some kind of robotics program, or in a music program. Instead, you're just thinking, well, what do I want for them, or what do I think will help make them successful? And in the end, I think that your kid or whoever you're working with, if you're trying to kind of fit the round peg into a square hole sort of thing, and say, I want you to operate like this because I think that this is how you should do it.
Yeah.
And you end up getting frustrated, but I think that person on the other end, whether it's your kids or someone else, they end up getting frustrated because they might not be able to articulate why they're feeling frustrated or why they feel like they're not being fulfilled in a way. But also, I think that kids will probably be able to sense your frustration as well, and the expectations and the disappointments that you might have as a parent. And so, if you're thinking about that, how do you develop the discipline to be able to stop and think, but then also to be patient and work with your kids through some of those things?
Well, I think some of those things, though, come in random moments where it's just noticing, instead of I have an agenda that I need to take them to, I try to empower opportunities when I see them. So it's when I see God working, doing something in one of my kids, and I was like, okay, well, I see them just taking that and running with it, then I want to enhance that and come along and support it. So we had about a little over a year ago, when we did a missions fair, and we were talking about Nigeria was one of the booths that we had on that Sunday morning. Our kids came around, and it was mainly because Victoria, who goes to Grace, who goes to Nigeria regularly, and she was handing out little Nigeria flags. So of course all our little girls wanted to get a flag. So that was the draw. So they're all over there, wanting to get a flag. But then when they did that, Victoria was said, now if you take one, you're going to have to pray for Nigeria. We said, okay, that, we pray every night. We'll pray for Nigeria, right? So Sophia, who's now 6, she was 5 at that time, took that very seriously. So she still prays almost every night for Nigeria, for the people in Nigeria. And like very intentional prayers. It's not just we pray for Nigeria. She will be praying for people there to stop the evil and greedy things that they're doing. She'll be praying for, people to come to know Jesus and to get baptized. Some of it's stuff that I haven't told her, like she just comes up with. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, she has a passion for prayer. And I noticed how consistent she was with it. Like she would ask me or tell me she wanted to pray for it. She would ask me to update her. She still does on stuff. She'll be like, if we're praying for something or somebody at the church or something, she'll be asking me, did we find out anything? Have you talked to this person recently? Whatever. And I'm like, no, I haven't. It's convicting to me because I'm like, I should be following up with that. I haven't asked, and I like, she'll challenge me on that because I'm not as consistent on that. And so she stayed with it, when Victoria was in Nigeria, and she would post updates on Facebook. So Sophia wanted to see the updates of where she was preaching and what they were talking about. And we would read them. And, that was driven by her desire, not mine. It wasn't because I said, I want you to have a heart for Nigeria or to pray for missions. It's because she just took from that random situation. I wasn't bringing them there and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to get them praying for Nigeria. We were just walking around and they wanted a flag. I mean, it starts in something simple like that, but noticing, having your kind of ears open to notice when your kid just seems to gravitate to something easily. And I think when Sophia took to that and started doing it every night, then I'm like, well, now I really want to enhance this. I want to make sure I pray with her about it every night. And then we also, I brought her here sometimes, before all the coronavirus stuff happened. I had her kind of take part on the prayer team a few times where we brought her in on Sunday morning. Like she stayed with me, but we were, on the side during Sunday morning where we do pray for people. I had her staying with me to just be part of it. Because I'm like, if she's got some kind of a gift towards prayer, I mean, she's 6 now. It's not like we know exactly what that's going to look like as she grows up. I have no idea. But there's obviously something in there that's a gift for her that I want to try to enhance somehow. And so I want to look for my opportunities where I can support it and encourage what I see her naturally doing, instead of me saying, well, one of my kids is going to have to learn this. And that's different, like with Ellie, who loves to read, and she will just digest so much stuff that we can give her to read. And I can say, let's make sure we're feeding her stuff to read. So, it's different with each one, but I think it's watching sometimes just in the random moments where you just notice your kid love something, gravitate to something, or something naturally, and we're having those kind of spiritual conversations that then, oh, wow, okay. And believing that even at 5 years old, that she can have a real gift at something. And it's not just stay out of the way, either to say, hey, the prayer of that little kid is valuable. And so to me, I was like, and I know Victoria said it was really encouraging to her, knowing that there was a young child praying for her, right? She felt like spiritually that was important, that this kid wants to pray for her while she's there, and that was really valuable. And so to me, it's to know there's spiritual value in what we're doing. It's not just teaching her something, but there's spiritual value in what we're doing. So taking those opportunities and saying, okay, let's take that and run with it. I don't know where that's going to go necessarily. And it feels more like God's leading something. I notice his spirit doing something, and I don't want to miss that. And so, okay, well, I'll adapt and start figuring this out as I go. Because I can't say I didn't come in with some game plan of here's how to pray with your kids. I find that awkward for the most part, from the beginning. I didn't have a template for that I think anytime I tried to pray with my family and do some of those things, it felt kind of awkward to me. So it wasn't like I came in and I had some kind of game plan and template for how I do that, and we've got a system, and it wasn't like that. It was more, okay, God's doing something in her, so let's start trying it. Some things stick, some don't. Sometimes I'm getting frustrated with them when I'm praying with them, and it's not always pretty. But it's saying, okay, if God's going this way, then I want to go there too, with my kids. So I think that's where that's usually what the process of, for me, is kind of trying to follow that lead when it comes up.
So you came on Father's Day and you shared some of those things with people, and you challenged the dads in our congregation. What was the response that you got? Because I'm assuming that your kids saw the stuff that you shared on Sunday, and then there was probably family members and different people that saw some of the stuff that you put like on Facebook and Instagram. And people may be curious, what were some of the reactions that you got from your kids or your wife and some of the other people online?
Yeah, I mean, and my kids are watching from home. They're still at home with my wife. So I knew they were watching me on TV. They'd been asking for a few weeks since we started doing in-person services and streaming live. They've been wondering, like, are we going to see you on TV? And I told them a couple weeks ago, like, I'm not just going to go interrupt worship time just to wave on TV. Like, that wouldn't work. So they've been asking that. And so I had told them, like, yeah, I'm actually going to be on TV this week. I'm going to be doing part of the sermon. So they were all excited and wanted to watch that. I had not told them that I was going to be talking directly to them. They didn't know that part. I think my wife didn't totally know that part. I hadn't gone into detail what I was going to share. So I didn't get to see the reaction live, but I know, talking to my wife, she said that they were very excited, and they definitely remembered the things I said. They were excited when I came home to give me a hug and, whatever. And I remember Sophia giving me a hug and saying she was my prayer warrior or whatever. It was fun. So they did that. I know, Nora, who's 2, I think by the time I was like, maybe I should have done her first, because I'm sure she was not totally focused by the time we got through there. So it didn't totally register with her. But, those are kind of things like with the younger ones that I hope will register as they grow. That'll evolve too in terms of their personality. I know it's changing a lot over the years. But so they were definitely, though, excited that I was talking to them on the TV. I think that's what it was for them. And it was fun. I know, I heard other family members that saw it, and, people that were, oh, that was so sweet. It made me cry. I heard a number of those kind of reactions of people that just thought it was so sweet when I was talking to my girls. And I hope it's a model. If I can set an example to say, yeah, that's the way I want to talk to my kids, then I'm honored if that happens. I think I had a couple of people that, were affirming, that was really affirming to me. Was I had a couple of people that coming out of service that said something related to, that had worked with my girls in children's ministry, things like that affirmed the things that I said, that like, no, you're exactly right. I've totally seen that in your girls, that know them well enough to affirm that they've seen the same thing. And so that was encouraging to me to know that others have seen those same kind of gifts in them. So I think there was, encouragement to that. And I think it set the tone. It was good for me attitude-wise, because I think Father's Day is typically hey, this is all about me as a dad kind of day.
Yeah.
And I should be able to do what I want today because, well, it's Father's Day. It's your job to honor me. This is all about me today. I get to do what I want. And I find that always sets me up for failure. And I think it's being able to be able to make Father's Day where I'm blessing my kids, where I'm appreciating being a dad, and I am doing something to speak to my kids, help me be in a different mindset for Father's Day and not coming in saying, well, what are you going to do for me today? I think it made Father's Day much better in a lot of ways, because it made me kind of get into an appreciative mode. So I think it set up the day to be really good. So then, they had their artwork that they made for me that they'd been working on to give to me and all that kind of stuff. It was fun. So yeah, it was neat to come home and kind of know that. And now my challenge is to kind of use those things and keep going with them. Is that I didn't want it to be a one-time thing. I want it to be part of how I affirm them regularly. Is that working on that helped me spot like what's special in each one, something that I want to continue to notice. I want to continue to say something to them so that sticks with them by talking about it repetitively. So that's kind of my personal ongoing challenge, would be to keep doing that and not did that on Father's Day. That was fun, and have it be over with. But
Yeah. And I think that whenever you treat it that way, and it's Father's Day isn't about me sitting back in a recliner, getting a card, and getting whatever I want for breakfast. Getting a bunch of bacon or whatever, no matter how bad it is for me. It makes something like that more meaningful because now you're sharing that with your kid. That's an experience that you're going to have with your daughters that you might not know what the impact of that will be 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And then to also take that and say I want to develop a habit to honor others the way that Jesus honored the Father honored the Son, the way that we're called to honor others. And so for anyone who's still listening or still watching, and maybe they're a dad and they are thinking, oh man, I still haven't done that. It's Thursday and I probably should have done that. Or, oh man, my wife she was asking me about that the other day, and I still haven't. What
pressure? What
would you? Yeah, no pressure if you haven't. But for those people, what would you say to them? What are some concrete things that they can do right now just to remind them, or for anyone who didn't hear the sermon, what are just a couple of things that you would encourage them to do? What would that look like?
Yeah, and I think it's because my hope in that, when I look at how I wanted to apply it and what I would hope other people would apply that to, it wasn't just here, do this today really quick. My hope would be that it creates a simple kind of shift in the way you talk to your kids or something you do. I mean, by all means, this is not how I talk to my kids all the time either. That's why it was a challenge for me, because it is easy for me to if you just jumped into my house at a given point, you're much more likely to see please just be quiet and let me get this done. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give the impression like that conversation on Sunday is not like, this is how I talk all the time to my kids.
It must be so easy for
very
Mike.
Positive and super spiritual all the time. That was an intentional move, because I know the easy default is to fall into frustration, to fall into, I'm trying to get these things done. I have plenty of that. So the intentionality of saying, I want to create space to where I think this way. And even if I do lose my temper sometimes, or I get frustrated over stuff, and I'm, there's moments where there has to be discipline. There's all of that stuff too. I want to make sure I create space where I'm affirming something in them. So this is really more of a long-term change. So the fact that somebody hasn't done it by now really isn't a big deal. It's really, this could serve as a reminder, like, get started. That's the hard part. I think the first step in that is just creating that space. So it's slowing down enough to say, where can I find time to really watch and observe what my kids are doing? So if they have little kids like me, it's about when we're at home, it's watching them. I mean, my kids are homeschooled. So when I was, home during all the, we were working from home for a while during this quarantine phase. I got to see them more doing homeschool stuff than I used to. Mm-hmm. So it might be just, I got windows into that when I would be downstairs, I'm making my lunch and they're still, going over lessons, and I get to kind of listen in on how they react to stuff, see what they're working on. It might be watching them, I see how they play with one another. I see the way they read with one another. Stella particularly, talked about how caring she is with her little sister. I could see she spends a lot of time with Nora. So there's those kind of things that I just notice. Wow, look how kind she was. Like, I noticed her being really thoughtful and intentional to do something to help her feel better. And you go, wow, that was really kind. Like, to see that was really sweet. It warms your heart to see your kids do that. It's really just make time to do that. If you have some people, listen, may have older kids or adult kids, it can be simple things like, hey, my kid got this scholarship in college, and I want to go and stop and take some time to notice what it took for them to get that scholarship, or this job, this project that my my daughter worked on or my son worked on at this job that they have as an adult. I saw them achieve this or accomplish that. What did it take for them to do that? What gifts did they have that led them to do that? Oh, look how hard they worked, how diligent they were, how detailed or creative they are. To stop and look for character traits, look for the deeper part of that, not just good job, you did a good job on that, but to say, what does that say about you as a person? What's that say about their gifts, about their character, things like that? And to say, I'm going to spend some time intentionally thinking about that stuff. I'm going to stop and say, what is good in my kid? And I want to look at things that they do to tell me that as a clue to it. So it's not too late to start that, because it wasn't intentional, like we need all of these posted on Facebook by Tuesday. It's really, I just wanted to start a process with people, and I hope we get to see it. I really want people to share what they're thinking or what they're seeing, and to put it out there, partly so that they're putting it out in public. That's one of the ways they can do that, is putting it on social media as they develop those, but also so the rest of us get to enjoy it, because it's super exciting. I mean, I've seen people in our church already do things like this. I saw, and in the immediate aftermath on Facebook, it's Father's Day. So you see more like wives, saying good things about their husbands, which is a similar vein. But I think when people do that kind of stuff, it's super encouraging for the rest of us to get to see somebody do it well. And so, to have that example of parents who know their kids well, who affirm them, and who are loving them and treating them, it's challenging as a parent to me to see that and go, wow, oh yeah, I want to do that, as opposed to, we have plenty of bad examples around. It's easy to find people who are, just checking out of parenting and not doing it, or who are doing it in a really hard-hearted kind of way. I mean, we've got bad examples on the news all the time. So to be able to see, here's somebody who's doing it really well, and I can affirm that, and especially when there are people from the church who I know their kids and I know them, and I can go, oh yeah, you're so right, your kid is great. It blesses the whole community when we do that. So I do want people to share that stuff and allow all of us to kind of join in that. But I hope that continues, not just this week. So somebody taking the time to really go deep with it and to say, yeah, I don't want to just throw something out there just to post something. I want to stop and really dig in. And I would say do it prayerfully, because that's, for me, God knows your kids better than anybody. He created them, and those gifts that they have are from him. And so to do it and say, God, show me, help me to see with your eyes the way you created them. And to look, because God shows you. Sometimes it's an example, like it was with Sophia and that prayer opportunity with Nigeria. But you never know where there's something that he leads you to and says, notice this, here it is happening right in front of you, where you go, oh, that was a window that God just showed me who this kid is and what's special about them. So I would say just take that time, pray and make that time. That's the hardest part of it, is to stop and contemplate and meditate on it and spend time thinking about it. So if they'll do that, even starting now, it will have great benefits.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that are listening and thinking, I want to learn more, or I want to start digging into this and thinking about it, there's a couple things that I would encourage you to do. Go to our Facebook page or go to our Instagram page at gccbartlesville. We made a post on Monday explaining in a few different steps how that could look like for you if you want to share the things that you're noticing in your kids publicly, and so you can see what that kind of looks like on social media there. And don't hesitate to go to our website, reach out to Mike to learn more about, some of the things that he's talked about, or more about strengths coaching and all these different things. I think learning different ways that you can show honor to others, it's something that we here at Grace want to do. And this is an easy stepping stone. If you can't do it with your kids, I don't know who else you can do it with. And so I would really encourage you just to think about this and just allow God to challenge you in ways of thinking like you haven't before. So thank you all again for listening and watching. You can find us online on YouTube. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you look for Grace Stories, or you can find all of those links on our website, gccbartlesville.org, and all of our social media handles, gccbartlesville. We will talk to you next week.